Hi, I'm Steve Morgan, and I'd like to invite you to another one in the series of short training videos that I'm putting together to support the development of my positive risk-taking membership site. In this particular video, I want to reflect on risk, the bureaucracy versus practice conundrum. On this occasion, I'll employ the glasses for gravitas, because I'm actually taking a look at the hotel restaurant menu at the moment. But putting that to one side, what I want to reflect on with you in this particular video is a number of questions around this bureaucracy versus practice conundrum. Firstly, have we got the balance right between risk paperwork and risk practice? And for those of you that, I'm sure there are many out there, feel, no, we're overloaded with the paperwork, then let's just stop for a moment and think, what would that world look like if we were to remove all the paperwork? And then also, for those of you that come from an academic, perhaps more than a practice base, this role of evidence-based practice when it comes to designing the kind of risk tools that we then expect practitioners, particularly in health and social care, to put into practice. So going back to that first question, have we got the balance of the paperwork and the practice correct? Well, over 30 plus years of my experience, I've been designing a number of different types of risk tools. And I've always come from the perspective that the tools are there to guide and support practitioners, as well as being able to capture essential information. But in talking to many practitioners and from my own experience over time, I'd have to say I do tend to have a lot of sympathy with the view that these tools are designed primarily for enabling audit, for capturing data. We're in the digital age, social media, constantly trawling for data and information on all of us. And for those of you who are tech phobic, then I'm sure there are other ages available, not just the digital age. But I do question whether the design of these tools may have lost sight along the way of the true purpose of assessing risk, of managing risk, of taking risks. And certainly, as I say, the number of practitioners that I have conversations with, they will tend more to the view that the tools that they're expected to use are cover the back exercise for the organisation, for senior management, going all the way up perhaps to Department of Health and the government. That the way they're designed, they're more of a tick box exercise and do not necessarily give a good reflection of the person or the circumstances in which the person is. And ultimately, for all the time that's spent completing these forms, I also have sympathy with the thought that there's not a lot of time spent reading and consulting these forms. They're supposedly there to communicate information with other people, but more often than not, they tend to get read when something's gone wrong. So there's an argument to be had as to whether you're the glass half full or the glass half empty type of person when you come to think about the fitness for purpose of the tools that we're expecting people to use. Now, if you are somebody that is particularly concerned about the idea of covering the back, ticking the boxes, and do we really need to be spending all the time looking at these particular tools, then I'll ask you to reflect for a moment or two on the world where I've been able to magically remove all the paperwork for you. You don't have to do any. Well, I can think back, I'm long enough in the tooth to know of a time when there was less emphasis on that question, where's the risk assessment? Have you done your risk assessment? When there wasn't the standardised tools that we see in all services these days. And I'm not talking about rose-tinted glasses here, because if I think back to that age, good practitioners and good teams were doing good practice and realised the importance of documenting, capturing that good practice. The problem is that bad practitioners and bad teams were doing nothing and covering their backs in other ways. And sadly, when something goes wrong, we can't predict whether that's going to be with good practitioners and teams involved or bad practitioners and teams involved. But the processes of inquiry, certainly going back dating from the early 1990s, has successively emphasised those rare events when tragedies have taken place. I don't want to minimise the tragedies that these involve, but they are rare events. And my view is that the majority of people have suffered as a result, because subsequently, as time moves on, more paperwork is created, despite many protestations that bureaucracy is being minimised or avoided. More paperwork's created, more forms are created, larger forms, longer forms, more comprehensive forms are being created. And I'm not convinced that these are providing very good guides to best practice, let alone being the most effective and efficient ways of capturing that practice. But the world without paperwork would be complete and utter chaos. That I am convinced. So my mantra throughout my career has always been, we need to achieve the minimum essential documentation. And in the design of the tools, we need to bear that in mind and think about how we are prompting our practitioners to achieve that aim. So where does this evidence-based practice come in? Because there will be claims that the tools that you're being asked to use are based in evidence. Well, firstly, I'd have to say that the evidence base for risk is narrow in its focus. It's primarily concerned with homicide, suicide, violence and aggression, degrees of self-harm. There are many other risks involved that services are working with, that people experience, and in terms of the constant research messages coming back telling us about risk factors and telling us that past history is the best indicator of future history, I'm still concerned that we're slavishly asking people to be ticking loads of boxes and take an awful long time in doing that. The outcome being a very poor reflection of who the person is that we're working with and their circumstances at that time. So it's a narrow focus in terms of the evidence, and yet this is what has informed the design of the vast majority of tools that are out there. There is no appetite for evidence around positive issues to do with risk, positive risk taken, to develop the kind of tools or the research even to support the tools that would help to implement positive risk taking. Which is why I've focused on it for so many years and tried to fill that gap myself as best as possible. So it's limited, and I'm not ignoring all the evidence. I'm not saying that the research is wrong. There are important messages that come there, but we need to move on from just focusing on rare events, ignoring the vast majority of good or best practice and positive practice that goes on. There's a danger that the tools themselves, the research, the consistent messages are helping to fuel the development of a blame culture. And that means that everybody feels very negative when they're thinking and reflecting on this fantastically exciting issue of risk. The trouble is we're also fueling some of the bureaucrats' dreams that more research is needed, repeating the same messages to create more complex forms, and these need to be filled in by everybody. It creates more and more data. So what's the main message in this particular video presentation? From my experience over the years, what I suggest is that the best fit-for-purpose tools are carefully constructed checklists rather than looking at tick box forms. To me, the benefit of a checklist is that it supports the important message about being client-centred, being individualised to the circumstances of a person that itself can change very rapidly. It helps to guide practitioners, but it gives the maximum amount of respect and permission for practitioners to use their own experience and judgment. But therein lies a problem. In my approach to thinking about bureaucracy in practice, switching the emphasis more back to practice, then I think we do need tools that are fit for purpose, these checklists that I mentioned. We need team-based training. We need individual and peer supervision. These things need to be built in to ensure standards of best practice are being achieved very consistently. Now, that's not radical. That's what good practice and good teams should be all about anyway. So I'm not creating a whole new vision of a new world here. But I am looking at shifting the emphasis that does place more respect for practitioners' engagement with people, understanding of people, and capturing the sufficient message and the evidence that will communicate the risks that we're working with. Communicate ways and means that people can work together. Now, my positive risk-taking membership site is packed with fit-for-purpose tools that both reflect what I think best practice is about, but also some of those important messages that do come from the research. So you'll find those through all 5 of the modules. You'll find them in the bonus materials. Wherever you're seeing this video, it may well be that you're on that site, but if not, if you're on my Strengths Revolution blog, or whether you're seeing this through Twitter or LinkedIn or wherever, I am naturally going to promote these ideas that I've been working on and developing in consultation with all kinds of practitioners over many, many years. Today I'm actually coming to you from Belfast. So if I take you for a little stroll here at the moment, those of you with sharp eyes, better eyesight than me, will actually see the Harland and Wolff crane there in the background, the old Belfast shipyard. I'm in the Titanic Quarter, but I don't want that to be a metaphor in any way for the work that I'm doing. So what I will say is, until the next video, let's go out there, let's help people to take some risks with carefully, clearly thought out positive outcomes.